Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome those who are joining us virtually. Welcome, good afternoon. And those joining us in person, welcome, welcome. So my name is Beatriz Cantata. I'm the Director of Engagement for Diversity and Inclusion in the Institute Community and Equity Office. It's an acronym, ICEO. So welcome to MIT. Before we begin, I do have some acknowledgements without who a team will not make this possible and making this successful. I'd like to thank our AV team at the back, Ramon and Nick. Again, this is a hybrid format event, so this has been really exciting because we're able to provide this service to those joining us virtually and in person. I'd like to thank Paulina Wolf, who also behind the scenes has made this possible, along with my other members of my team, Molly McInerney and Rachel Ornitz. So again, like I said, this is a team effort to make this possible. Our senior leadership support, Provost Cindy Barnhart and Institute Community Equity Officer, John Dozier. I'd also like to acknowledge people in the audience joining us virtually and in person. So our colleagues at Lincoln Lab. We also have Professor Mary Fuller, who is the incoming chair of the faculty. She's joining us in person. She also is a faculty host for one of our MLK scholars who's joining us today, and I'll mention the scholars shortly. I'd like to acknowledge Professor Jesse Thaler from Department of Physics. So he is the faculty host, and members of his department joining us virtually or in person. Professor Ed Bergiger is also here in the audience. Some of you may know him. He is a faculty member of physics, but he is also, he was the first Institute Community Equity Officer. The scholars, so our scholars who are joining us here, we have Brandon Ogbunu, Javit Drake, Daniel Auguste, Eunice Ferreira, and Wasalu Jaco. So some of them are joining us virtually, some in person, so thank you. For those joining us virtually, we will have a treat for you. We'll be providing Uber Eats voucher for those joining us from the United States. If we have international folks, that will not be eligible. We will also be recording this session. I'm just looking at Paulina just to confirm. Yes, we are recording this session. Friendly reminder, please stay muted during the presentation. There will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. And at that time, please feel free to unmute. You may also use the chat function if you would like to ask questions, particularly those joining us virtually. Live captioning is also available. Last plug, please subscribe to our newsletter, iceo.mit.edu, if you'd like to hear more about our events and future presentations with our MLK scholars. Our speaker this afternoon is Dr. Brian Nord. Dr. Brian Nord is a scientist from Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory and from University of Chicago. He joins the MIT Laboratory for Nuclear Science with Professor Jesse Thaler in the Department of Physics as his faculty host. His efforts will be aimed at introducing new insights into how we model physical systems, design scientific experiments, and approach ethical artificial intelligence. I pass the virtual mic now to Professor Brian Nord.
How's that audio? Is it coming in the mic? Does it work? Keep it in there. Okay. Thank you, folks, for coming out to hang out and have a discussion today. Thank you to Beatrice and the ICO crew. Appreciate it. Everything you've been doing the last few months for us. I am hoping we can have a conversation today. So there will be junctures where I'll sort of have questions that I'll ask people at your tables to discuss, or like with partners around topics around these questions. I think this isn't a conversation that we usually have, and that's why I'm experimenting with having it in this way. I think what often happens is that we ask people that want to become scientists or want to be involved in the academic enterprise, we ask them to fix themselves, especially people from marginalized groups, to accommodate what the structures are that have been in place for hundreds of years, 150 if you think about academic research institutions. So there are things that we can learn, we can learn skills to navigate that world. We have to learn the skills of how to do research and how to learn better. But there are also these systemic things that are happening that is not something that a person can fight by themselves, and it's not something that that we can expect people to overcome just on their own. So let's turn these questions into something else. I'll start with an ansatz, which is where I come to how I came to these questions, is to realize, and I think I was thinking about this really when I was just getting started in physics in high school, like 17 or something. This kind of thing, this thought started germinating. We do science. Humans have to be around to do the science. And we are the ones who are affected by it, principally, and the rest of living things on the globe. And so to me, this then points to the fact that if this is a human endeavor, everyone should have access to it that wants to. But this is not the case, and because of those other questions or those other points that I was making at the beginning. So the questions that I want us to approach today, and I'll drill down another layer of detail to questions for you to ask of each other in a little bit. Why doesn't everyone have access to this endeavor? And then what can we do about it? So for the second part, or for both of these, I hope that we can use our imagination to answer these questions practically and in detail. Because until we get into the concrete aspects of this, how do we expect to make any changes? And I hope that I can convince you that we do need to make some changes. And in particular, the second question, I think a lot of us think about the barriers, but in the second question, I don't think we often think of working as a collective. And I think that will be essential given the concentration of power that we see in academia. So I thought I'd start a little bit with my journey. And if you got this reference, I love you, thank you. So I grew up reading comics, trying to dunk from the free throw line, fell in love with Seamus Haney, and I literally read Word Up magazine. Like that was my childhood for the most part. And then at some point I started discovering physics, and the sort of the desolate beauty of outer space, feeling like if imagining that you're this first person to do an EVA, and then turning around and looking into space, like that sort of exquisite loneliness and at the same time oneness with the universe, like pulled me in. I was in. And then I saw contact, and then I started studying wormholes, and I was like, okay, I need to do physics. And then I started to realize how, not only is there a pleasure in finding things out and in discovery for myself and being a first person to figure something out, but the greater context of humanity presents itself in something like this. So this is from Lunar Orbiter 1, 1966. And this is literally the first picture ever that contains the entire Earth inside it. And so you start to, that's another way to see humanity and see my context and see humanity's context in the world. And so as I got into college, I looked a little bit deeper, and while I didn't end up going into space, maybe someday I will, but studying cosmology was another way for me to merge my need to write down equations with another piece of philosophy of understanding the universe, because cosmology is concerned with studying the origin and the fate of the universe. And so the context for my appreciation of my appreciation of the connection between humanity and the cosmos only got stronger and stronger. One way to maybe to point out to you how, in a way, how important cosmology is for the fate of the universe is to look at this simulation, which is it's a simulation of a small piece of the universe into the future. So if you follow one of these little particles here, that's a large blob of dark matter, like galaxy size. So what I want you to do as you see, as you watch this simulation, I want you to pick a particle at the beginning and then say, okay, does it fly off and stay far away, or does it come back and merge with the thing in the middle? And so while you're doing that, what you're seeing here is coalescence of galaxies and dark matter in the universe while the universe is expanding. So it's not zooming in, it's literally the space-time is literally expanding outside the picture. And so as you follow these, what you see is eventually, in about 50 billion years, this mega galaxy at the center will be so far away from other mega galaxies where this is also happening that light will never go from one to the other. And so we will have these lonely island universes at 50 billion years in the future, we think. So that is currently our best guess at the fate of the universe. So all this is to say, cosmology and physics, like I took that personally, like I merged all of that into me. And then when I got to college, I really thought it was going to go like this, you know? I was pretty sure, and it actually kind of went like that. Struggled for a while because I didn't know what to do. I thought, okay, I'll just do the equations. I'll do the books. Maybe I'll do a little bit of research, figure out how that goes. But there are these whole swaths and this whole panoply of tips and tricks and things that you don't know unless you have a network, unless you have people around you to help you understand what to look out for, what pitfalls to look out for, what things you need to do a year ahead of time to be ready for something like an internship. So if I think about my timeline of learning, in college, I was like, okay, I'm going to be curious. Oh, but maybe I'll create things. So I realized you had to do some research. But then I saw tutoring in grad school. And then later I realized, okay, what that really becomes in a bigger way is mentorship. And creation or publication actually has to eventually turn into vision. And as a PI, I'm not just managing people. I have to lead people, both intellectually and in other ways. But these are things that I learned like well after I was already in the mix. I didn't know it ahead of time. There wasn't anyone around to tell me. In a more specific example of research, what I've been doing with some colleagues recently is to, and this is a little bit from a deficit model perspective. So it's not my favorite way of looking at it, but it's how we started this project, thinking about what issues and challenges researchers face in a group, in a research setting. So I reflected on my challenges going through undergrad and grad school to figure out how to do research. And then I also looked at, or we looked at the about 100 students that I've been mentoring over the last decade to look for patterns in what issues people face. So for example, one of the big ones that I've found is like sort of this rabbit hole thing at the top. What'll often happen, and I did this as a grad student, is, all right, I'm gonna have this thing done for you next week, prof. Not done. Can we postpone the meeting? And then that happens a number of times. And then you feel so bad that you didn't get the thing finally finished. You're like, oh crap, this is going to be the worst thing in the world. This is going to be the worst conversation. And it ends up not being that bad, but this psychology is prevalent where people build up this kind of shame in their minds, waiting for that conversation to happen. And so that's just one of the habits, like sort of negative habits that I've seen in myself and junior researchers in trying to progress through an academic research environment. So what we've seen is that there are a lot of programs out there that deliver introductory research experiences, and then also there are other programs that help develop skills like coding and speaking. But what we haven't found is sort of a curriculum that addresses those issues with research habits and other things like time management, how to do group work and things like that. So this is sort of a specific example of, or we're calling this SHIRE, so scientific habits of inquiry and research environments. This is a specific curriculum that we're trying to develop that we think will help people overcome those issues as individuals that I and others have faced. So here's our first little interlude where I'm hoping to take a few minutes where people at your tables can think about these questions. So what tactics have you learned along the way for your career? And when did you learn them? Did you learn them in time to use them? Did you learn them in time to share them with the next generation? So yeah, if you could just take and I can, if people have questions about how I want you to go down that road with these, let me know. But yeah, if you could jam on these in your group for a few minutes, that'd be great. Thank you for having these. This is great. Could I get each table to just share one idea that they had? Could I go here? So being organized.
Yes. You can get pretty far in academia with just following your interests. Then eventually you actually have to start.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So we were talking about the importance of being organized.
Yeah.
You can get pretty far in academia, just kind of doing your thing and churning through the things that come across that are interesting. But at some point, you actually have to prioritize, make decisions, make timelines, and stop procrastinating.
And that's a thing that an individual can do, right? Like that's not a systemic issue. That's something that's a skill that people can learn. Skill, habit.
I don't know when we converged on.
You can just pick one.
We jammed on a bunch of things. I think we talked about having things outside of your craft was a big one that popped up in a couple of ours. Being able to have not tying the entirety of your identity to your work, having other things that you can do. And I think that's that's actually coming for everybody at this table. So yeah.
Right. So I guess there is a systemic issue with that, and like how the culture of academia promotes you to do that. But as an individual, that's actually an interesting case where there's probably, I would say it's a little bit half and half. Like it's something you can't fully beat yourself, like to overcome yourself, but there are things you can do to like mitigate it. Yeah, interesting.
That's right.
Do you mind? Yeah.
We talked about a couple of things, and like one is sort of written and then one is unwritten. So the tactics you've learned is how to sell yourself. You constantly have to, there's one thing of like, you want to be able to say, I did this. But the other side of it is like, you're saying I did this and you're sort of justifying your existence over and over again. And that's like taught all over the place. And then we also discussed sort of the reason we learned that is because there can be different levels of that for men and women.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's really great. So yeah, again, a little bit you can do yourself, but there's a systemic issue.
Yes.
At the same time. Yeah. Would you all talk about tips or tricks you learned?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only so much in terms of being a more productive researcher, but actually feeling better about doing the research. And some of the things you talked about, the shame of the work that I've done this week good enough to talk to my collaborator or my PI, like just getting around that. Or in the case, he mentioned the example of, well, someone else just came out with this publication that like challenges what I'm doing. So I gotta come up with an answer better. So getting out of that mindset of actually just being in a little bit of the mental rat race. Yeah. And thinking about, okay, this is a vision. I'm trying to solve society's problems with what was that he was describing, or this discussion with this other PI is not about justifying why I'm here, which is a trap that kind of URMs can fall into, right? So externally and self-imposed imposter syndrome. But this is a discussion of progress.
Right.
This is a discussion of working with that person. And in some ways, when it's more uncertain, it's actually maybe better have that discussion earlier. So not putting so much of a barrier to that. So I think it's a lot of us about just feeling better about doing the research and therefore doing better research.
So figuring out how to, as an individual, to not keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah. Get everything.
Or the Jacksons. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. So we're gonna do a complementary exercise to this when it comes to systemic issues in a little bit. So I want to set the stage for that. One of the ways I think to set the stage is to remind ourselves sort of systematically who is not in the room. So I just want to get realigned with the picture. there are not a lot of people of color and other minoritized groups in physics, in science and engineering. So this is from National Academy of Sciences a few years ago. It'd be great if they do another one soon, but this gives you a sense of statistics. I'm not going to read the graph off to you, but I will highlight this here. Indigenous peoples are super underrepresented. And then again, if we look at women in physics in particular, it's about 20%, and it hasn't changed that much over decades. So this is doctorate, master's, bachelor's, percent women in physics as of 2014. It actually went down a little bit for masters and bachelors. So I'm going to make some claims now that are based on my experience, and these are discussions that I've had with other people, and I haven't heard a lot of dissent on these claims, but I would love to hear yours if you have it. So academic structures are very hierarchical. Part of this is, this line here is how we're trying to get to tenure, and this is also the. I think this strongly reflects, if not as a direct result of just how universities were created 150-ish years ago, and I think it reflects the capitalist orientation of much of our societies. Another way to look at this is the bottleneck. So if the yellows, the oranges, and the greens are students and early career scientists, and the purple is PI, most of communication and information flow goes toward the PI. So here we're seeing, we have information asymmetry giving asymmetry, helping to create power asymmetry. And so I claim that these are parts of our academic structures that create lack of accountability, power differentials, and information asymmetry. And why is this a problem? Well, we can see in physics over the last 7 years, there are specific instances that have been widely discussed in the media. This is all public information of mostly men, but not just men. Often there are a few women that I can share names of that are out there that have used those structures to continue to bring themselves power, clout, and to use it to sort of oppress other people. So in 2015, Jeff Marcy, it was revealed that for 10 years, he was serially harassing women. Christian Ott fell in love with a student, then fired her. Timothy Slater and his partner in his group sexualized the environment. And then at a slew of universities, this has happened. And it's not over. So since what I couldn't fit on here, people like Lawrence Krauss, who else? I'm not coming up with the names of, ETH in Zurich. It was actually so bad there in the physics department that this is Marcella Corolla and Simon Lilly. They were chairs of the physics astronomy department. The news got to the parliament in Switzerland, to the floor of parliament. And this is because of how universities are organized in Switzerland. It got to the floor of parliament, and the parliament through ETH, Zurich, had to break up the physics and astronomy department because of these two people serially harassing their students for years. Okay. So let's look at a timeline of learning about the system. This is a little bit similar to before, but I'm trying to emphasize more of the systemic aspects of that environment. So publications are our currency. That's systemic. So we go from sort of learning to producing and making sure the world knows what we produced. A department environment is important, but more often the group environment can be more important, or at least can make working in an institution possible. Lone Newtons or lone Einsteins are often lauded. They're often shown as being the way to succeed. But more often than not, if you've got a close crew across continents or across institutions or across fields, people you can trust, then you break up that information asymmetry because you get a lot more information from a different kind of community. And progression up that pyramid, what I think is really underlying that is understanding power dynamics. So what I find is interesting that a lot of my faculty, including tenured faculty friends, and these folks tend to be not people of color, they will say, well, I don't want to rock the boat right now because I might need this person's vote at some point. Or I don't want to rock the boat right now because I want to be chair someday and I can make real change. And to me, this just reflects a really naive understanding of power dynamics, because just because you become chair of department or dean of some bigger thing doesn't mean you're not beholden to people. It doesn't mean that you have all the power to do things. So I'm a little bit, this last one in particular is really concerning for me, because I would hope that people who have made it through this system as it was had seen enough to understand that you don't become ruler of an area just because you progress. You have to understand the intricacies of politics and power dynamics in our institutions. Okay, so this is your next jam session. Could you talk about, please, structural barriers that you see impeding progress, and what you think imagine you're not alone, or maybe you're alone, but imagine you're not alone, and what do you think we could do as a community, as a collective, to try to upend some of these barriers?
Barriers that mean that someone who might be potentially interested doesn't even have an opportunity, doesn't even have exposure, as you said, being able to see the stars. Can you see it if you're in an urban area? Do you even know that those opportunities exist? And then I was talking about how a lot of the hierarchies that you're talking about, they're enforced by the way that money flows through the system. Where if a student wants to work on something, they have to work with the PI who wants to work on that topic. That PI has to work on something that the grant agencies want to fund. And so there's this hierarchical structure built in just the way that money flows. And even if you're trying to do the right thing, sometimes the flow of money doesn't allow you to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks.
So I'm not gonna try to say what other people said, because maybe I don't fully understand it. But one thing that maybe we were saying is, if you're in the game for the love of the game, then the structure is not gonna bother you as much. But if you want to advance in the game, you have to play the game and understand it. And then I think what we said is, well, the game doesn't have to be that way, right? There's always going to be a system, and there's always going to be this struggle socially to have a more perfect system, And yes, so we definitely, I guess we didn't come up with any answers to the question, but we did say that maybe you don't have to play the game, but in a sense you do. That's kind of how science works. We didn't come to a conclusion, I guess.
No, but you talked, and that was great.
Yeah.
That's good.
We talked about the well-being and work-life balance in the academic system, and as we know, PIs are under a lot of pressure. So there are a lot is going on with them, and when they expect the staff to do some work, there would be late night calls or emails sometimes. So what we thought is that maybe that's the only time where when they remember something, they have time, then they just send out these emails, but not more than 90% of the times they don't expect you to respond immediately. As long as you get back to them, that's fine. And on our part, we need to take a breath, and we should set up our own boundaries. If you want to work 9 to 5, just respond in the timeline. Or if you want to do extra work, then you can respond after hours. And another thing also is some PIs, when they are very stressed out, they can take out the anger on the subordinates. But I have seen some groups where the group itself would follow the behavior of the root PI. But in other groups, the groups itself would build their own support system and console each other, help each other to come out of that depression and actually focus on completing your work, not to keep getting stuck in that negative loop.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. You want to share?
Okay. Yeah, I think what we discussed is kind of to along what you showed in terms of the, I guess the PR being the bottleneck. I think like having kind of maybe like another independent node in the system that could sort of like somehow, I don't know, monitor the system. Yeah, that might be helpful. Also, maybe having some nodes kind of in the middle between the group and the PI might also be helpful. Yeah, I think these are kind of the things that we discussed. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Actually, that's very prescient for what you're going to see in a second here. So how do we off? Should I do it? There we go. Thanks. Okay. So we're running a little bit late on time, so I'm going to skip a little bit here. What I basically want to say though is that so here I'm going to before wrapping up, I want to jump into the intersection of technology and science and how that progresses and how that can be used as an opportunity to put into place some of what you've been saying, some of your solutions. So basically, I do facial recognition for galaxies, which is great until we realized that, oh, I want to make some big breakthrough, like fundamentally like helps things move along for galaxies. But since it's facial recognition, that's also literally going to help AI algorithms track us better. So there's a tension there that has to be addressed, for me at least. And another way to put that is new technologies can be used to disrupt organizational structures, but they can also be used to concentrate power and maintain the status quo. And AI is one of those situations. So it's everywhere. It's in all these places where we think it maybe is helping us. Yeah, maybe we'll get self-driving cars in another 10 or 20, 100 years, I don't know. But more importantly, what I worry about is the modern surveillance state. So cameras around everywhere are watching us. They can really detect, they can figure out who we are, unless you have darker skin, then they're terrible at it. And then people pretend that they can predict things about you, like your political orientation, your gender, and that stuff is just not true. It can't do that, but they make predictions anyway. Or maybe they'll make other predictions that are more useful, maybe like trying to get you to buy more stuff based on what you've bought in the past. And so that's the control. So this loop of surveillance and control is really happening all around us. Just recently, the Ring Nation, Wanda Sykes is hosting this thing called Ring Nation, where it's America's Funniest Home Videos, but the videos are taken from Ring cameras. Did you consent to that when you bought your Ring camera? NYPD and SFPD are using robots. And now just last week, SFPD, they got, San Francisco voted for them to be able to use robots to literally kill people. That is now allowed in San Francisco. It's not AI yet, but it's like basically 3 lines of code from having an automated killer robot. So again, like what I was saying earlier, I dove into this AI stuff, but before I knew what it really meant. And so the question is, how does that align with my values? And how can I use it to disrupt what I think I want to disrupt? So like, how do I thread the needle? How do I keep doing science and still do these things? So one thing that we've been doing in our group, or in my, with some colleagues here, is over the last 5 years, we've been building a community that the idea is to flatten, I'll just jump to this, is to flatten the hierarchy. So in this scenario, the idea is that while there are schedules, while people have to get things done, their health and their humanity comes first in this organization. And also more precisely in my research group, these are the kinds of networks that I draw instead. So information flows both ways, and we build a community and a culture where people can ask each other for help, and they don't have to wait for me, or they don't have to come to me, although they absolutely can. So we don't have time for it, because I think we're about done, right?
We have about 5 minutes.
But then that's for questions.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just finish here. Maybe I'll finish with this. And the questions that I'm hoping you're taking away today are, how do we think concretely about the actions that we can take as a community to upend some of these things? Jesse, you mentioned money. So if it's how the money flows, then what's keeping us, for example, as a community, from identifying the Jeff Marcys before they become full-blown Jeff Marcy and holding them accountable through their funding before they get so far? So this is something actually I want to bring to HEPAP as a discussion, for example, right? How do we as academicians, as a group, push back on our funding agencies and say, look, you're allowing the community to be destroyed by, if you want to call them bad apples, or this bad system that enables bad apples. Like, how do we push back against that as a community? So thank you.
So we have a few minutes left for Q&A. I'm going to ask Paulina to just take a quick look in the chat session if there are any questions that we can bring to Brian, but also I want to open it up to our audience in person. And Brandon, I saw your hand raised.
Yes. So this is going to be a year-long conversation between us. This is really, really cool, really, really important. This figure with the network in the information flow going in both directions. One of the things I always ask about seminars, like basic things about this profession, I always ask, well, how many times have you seen a seminar given by 2 people at a time? The answer is like,
yeah, it's rare.
Really never, and for no reason, right? So it's another example of something. So really brilliant work here. I guess my question really is a little bit at a higher level up from you. And so in genetics, we have this problem where the thing you did about AI is beautiful. We have an analogy in quantitative genetics. Genetics kind of information is kind of misused and weaponized by scientific racists all the time. Remember in the Buffalo Massacre, right? It was basically this creed that was basically kind of like this botching of scientific kind of genetic information that me and my colleagues produce. Now, I think when I raise this to my colleagues, and you're the perfect person to ask this question, when I raise this to my colleagues about how we can do better, how we can actually prevent our science from being misused, right, in the ways that it's misused, the answer that we got oftentimes was, well, it's not my fault that it's misused. Well, I'm just a scientist. It's my job to do the science as good as possible. And you know what? Being charitable, I think they actually are probably decent people, the scientists, but they don't feel a responsibility, right, when their science is falling into dark hands and being used for dark purposes. So I guess I'm curious how you arrived at the identity that it is your responsibility as a physicist to think about the work that you do and its impact. And what would you say to other people in your field who don't think it's their responsibility to be thoughtful about the way the facial recognition stuff that you're using for galaxies is not misused? You seem to have kind of closed that circle. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think part of it is by being a person of color, not, skin folk and kin folk always, right? So not everyone's going to realize that, but so having that awareness already and being ready for that, their awareness made me ready to realize sort of the contradiction in terms. And then, going beyond that, if you're not someone who is directly affected by those things, it becomes a similar question, I think, to how people have seen the evolution of queer rights over the last decades, knowing someone and caring about that person. And so part of the problem, it comes down to segregation. Our academic communities are highly segregated. And what keeps us from really pulling that into our bones is that, at least in physics, we have this idea that science is wonderful and is open to everybody. We should all collaborate and we should all be great. This whole Pollyanna view of things allows us to ignore the reality that we are segregated, actually. Yeah. So there has to be another, the skill of empathy has to be cultivated to bridge that gap between the segregated communities, I think. Yeah.
Other question over here.
Yes, great talk, Brian. And as you know, I'm an editor at the MIT Press. Before that, I was an editor at Physics Today magazine. What do you think is the role of gate-kept published works, right? Books and articles, because we have social media now, and there's no gatekeeping there. You can put things out, you can use blogs, etc. But I wonder if you think that's a good thing. What are the pros and cons of that? And what are the pros and cons of what I call gate-kept published works, where there is some sort of vetting to that work in flattening the hierarchy?
Well, so I look at Black Twitter, and that's a community that people have been able to learn from and get around. Like if we had to wait for the Physics Today articles to come out to share the stories that people need to hear, then I think the whisper network would grow much more slowly. People would learn themselves how to mitigate the systemic issues much more slowly. And while I think curation of some of that knowledge and scholarship is really important, they often like the backdrop is a white supremacist society that puts together those publishing companies, and so there's a different allegiance there in that scenario than there is in something like Black Twitter. And so I see that democratization for marginalized folks to share their voice, I think, is super important. But I think we do need the peer review and the other things, especially when it comes to scholarship. I'm not sure about opinion when it comes to opinion articles, but when it comes to scholarship, I think that's off the top of my head, that's where I see that maybe not gatekeeping, but a curation as being really important.